He said his wife said, take a picture of it. He didn't say that his wife said, hey, why don't you post this on social media so the world... Welcome to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM for Tuesday, May 20th. I'm Andrew Walworth, and I'm joined by RCP co-founder and president Tom Bevan and Washington bureau chief Carl Cannon. So, guys, the fallout over the Biden cancer story continues. Yesterday, on Monday, President Trump weighed in, telling reporters, quote, I'm surprised that the public wasn't notified a long time ago because to get to stage 9, that's a long time. Somebody is not telling the facts. And then there was this reaction from Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat. Take a listen, Tom. Tell me what you think of this.
My expectation that President Biden is going to meet this moment with the courage and resilience that he's consistently shown. Seems to me entirely inappropriate that at this moment in time, when President Biden is dealing with a serious and aggressive form of cancer, there are Republicans who are peddling conspiracy theories.
Conspiracy theorists, Tom? What do you think?
No, not going to get away with that. I mean, listen, again, we can be sympathetic, and we should be sympathetic for Biden and his diagnosis of cancer. And we can wish him well and a speedy recovery, as Trump did the other day, and lots of Republicans have. But at the same time, we can also raise questions about when he knew, who knew, and when they knew, and what they did about it. Because clearly, from the majority, now I've seen a couple of doctors. There was one who wrote a piece on MSNBC, not surprisingly, say, well, this is how it could have happened. And you know, we've seen this happen before with people that are in their 80s. They stop doing testing, and when they're 75, and they do that for normal people. They don't do that for the president of the United States, right? Because it is the most important job in the world. And so it is inexplicable that he either wasn't tested for this or he was tested for it, and we didn't know the results of it. And the fact that he looks like now the majority of people, experts, say that he probably had this cancer for a number of years, leads to all sorts of new questions about, you know, who knew, when they knew, why they didn't tell the American public, who's running the government, what treatment was he getting, what side effects might that have had. There are all these questions now that were raised by this. And again, we can raise those questions and still be sympathetic to the president and his personal battle that he's fighting. But this is too important of a job and too important of a situation to just say, you know, oh, just because he has cancer, therefore we can't ask any questions about it, and we can't investigate it at all, and we just have to let it go. That's not going to happen.
So, Carl, how should this roll out? I mean, how should we, as the American public, try to figure out, you know, who knew what, why they didn't tell us, or did they not know, and did they not try to find out? I mean, there are so many questions. Like I say, how do we roll it out?
Well, one person we don't have to ask is Joe Biden, because he told us when he was president, he said, like millions of Americans, I have cancer. And we were startled by that. And then all his aides said, oh, he didn't mean that. You know, it's not what he meant. Well, apparently it seems like maybe it is what he meant. And I'm with Tom here, Andy. We need to hear from the White House physician who treated, I think his name's Kevin O'Connor, when Biden was president. He's a close family friend of the Bidens. You know, there's what we talked about this yesterday. There's one of 3 choices here. They didn't test for it, which, you know, maybe in a person that age, they stopped testing for prostate cancer for most people. But why would you not test a president? You need the president to be healthy. Or they tested for it or didn't show up until recently. And this is not, by the way, unheard of. It seems there were plenty of doctors say it's unlikely a cancer this far advanced would present, but maybe it just, you know, it's aggressive. Maybe it showed up and it's moving that fast. That's a possibility. Or they did find it and they decided to lie about it. That's the scenario. With all respect to Hakeem Jeffries, that's something the American people have a right to know about. If the president's advisors, the first lady, his team, his doctors found this diagnosis and then withheld it from their American people, then we need to know why they did that and how we prevent this from happening in the future.
And can I just say that the Democrats and quite frankly, you know, there were some headlines from the Daily Beast and some of these other media outlets. The idea, it is so offensive and now almost a joke to be calling this a conspiracy theory. That, oh, this is a conspiracy theory. No, it's not. I mean, that seems to be the de facto move for Democrats and left. Any criticism or anything they don't like, oh, that's a conspiracy theory. And we now know that many of the quote unquote conspiracy theories that were labeled as such by the Democrats and the media turn out to be actually the truth.
Well,
So-
Tom, next thing you're going to tell me that virus came from a lab in Wuhan.
I know. Can you
Yeah.
believe it, Carl? Shocking. No, but so they clearly haven't learned the lesson. I mean, this kind of gaslighting has not worked, and yet they continue to engage in it. It just shows that they continue to be either really self-unaware, which I don't think Hakeem Jeffries is a dummy. He knows what he's doing, but it is supremely cynical. And not only that, it's bad politics because it's not working anymore.
Yeah. Well, the guy at the center of this, it seems to me, is, as Carl mentioned, the doctor, Colonel Kevin O'Connell. He's the president's personal physician. He served under Trump as well, January 2021 to March 2025. And he gave Biden a clean bill of health in February 2024. Interestingly, he also worked with Beau Biden on Biden's brain cancer, very close to the family, and maybe even had some business dealings with them, Carl. I mean, should he be subpoenaed? It seems to me there got to be records, and there's got to be a way to find out, the truth of this.
You know, I hear you, Andy. I'm getting a little weary of everything has to be investigated, and if it's investigated by the opposite party, then documents get turned over or 86th, to use a word that's in the news.
Attaboy, Carl.
What I'd really like is this doctor to hold a press conference and to answer questions. And I don't know who can prevail on him to do that, but I think there needs to be accounting. But these investigations, they're like criminal proceedings in a courtroom. It's an adversary proceeding between the Democrats and Republicans. There were some hearings in 2023 on censorship, and Bobby Kennedy Jr. was subpoenaed to testify, and the Democrats actually tried to censor him at the hearing on censorship. Literally, that's what they said. They wanted to go into executive session. They didn't think he should be allowed to testify in Congress, and that's what these things turn into, as a circus. I would rather this not be an adversary proceeding. I think both, if there's anything like party leaders left in this city, they ought to be able to agree that the American public has a right to know the health of the president and not be shined on. Donald Trump, he hasn't been very transparent about his health, but this thing here, there's a possibility it's a cover-up, not a conspiracy theory, a cover-up. And if there is, I'd like to see them come clean and explain their rationale. I just think as this thing becomes partisan, we're almost less likely to find out what happened, Andy.
Mm-hmm. Well, Tom, I want to talk about LaMonica McIver.
McIver.
She is the New Jersey Democrat who was charged Monday with felony assault against a federal officer. This was stemmed from a protest she attended outside an ICE detention center earlier this month. Acting Attorney General Alina Habba said this. She said, "No one is above the law, politician or otherwise. It is the job of this office to uphold justice regardless of who you are. Now we will let the justice system work." And McIver responded by saying this arrest was purely political. How do you see it?
She also said that she was engaging in oversight. Her responsibility as a congressional representative, as this ICE detention facility was in her district. Look, the problem for Rep. McIver is that there was videotape of this, and she was clearly pushing and shoving and elbowing these ICE officers. I mean, that isn't even really in dispute. And so I don't know how she could say that that was part of her oversight, capabilities. She was clearly mixing it up with ICE officers, and there was a scrum, and there was a lot of pushing, but she was clearly participating in it. So, again, and as would be the case, because it's always this way. She had a tweet or a post on X not too long ago that said, something about President Trump and Elon Musk are not above the law. No one is above the law. This was the great phrase that the Democrats used, and now it's being used for them, and they don't seem to like it very much. And so we'll see how this case plays out. But the videotape, to me, is, it's pretty clear that she was involved in the scuffle. Now, whether it was a criminal, whether she was, will be convicted of a crime for that remains to be seen. But she was clearly in the mix.
Carl, what do you think?
I see it a little differently. I don't know if you guys have been watching the NBA playoffs this week and last week, but the amount of shoving that existed in that little scrum there, in some of these games, it wouldn't even be a foul in the NBA. I mean, this is...
LeBron would have flopped for sure.
Okay. He would have flung himself into the third row. True. But some of these people, and Caitlin Clark wouldn't have budged. I mean, so I don't know. Again, I'm picking up on the theme. I guess I'm in a peaceful mood today, or a non-adversarial mood. The Trump administration, Donald Trump himself ran, and it was a big part of his campaign and a big part of the reason he won. The Democrats clearly weaponized the criminal justice system in the state of New York, certainly in Atlanta. And, the Trump people argued at the federal level with Jack Smith charges. And, I took the Jack Smith, I think the Jack Smith indictments were a little more serious than the Alvin Bragg one, but Trump ran against it. He said that's a misuse of the criminal justice system. They are weaponizing cops and prosecutors, and they shouldn't do it. Well, you'd think that the party and they won that argument. And I think that, the question here is, does this really have to raise to that level? The U.S. attorney there apparently offered a plea deal.
Yeah, she turned it down.
Congresswoman McIver she said on CNN today, it was a weird interview. She said like 15 times, I'm just doing my job. Well, okay, but really?
Carl, let me ask you a question. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What if that was me? What if I was the one who was pushing and shoving? Would I be charged?
Tom, there were a lot of, look, I've seen those videos you have, and I imagine if this thing goes to trial, there'll be a lot more videotape than we've seen on television, on YouTube. I've looked at all of it. At one point, she's being pushed herself behind. She lashes out with her elbow, her arm. I don't know whether you'd be charged or not. What I'm saying is that I think that at this moment, there's a larger issue at stake here. Now, what the Trump administration people say, they would agree with that. They said the larger issue is Democrats, elected officials in the Democratic Party, routinely interfering with lawful arrests, with the function of the federal government to enforce immigration laws. And that's why they've indicted this judge in Wisconsin. So what they want this stuff stopped. And they say the sanctuary cities themselves are patently illegal, that you don't have a right to obstruct federal law. So the Trump people see this as a bigger issue. And I'm saying, but there's another issue at stake here, and it's to show that you're not criminalizing policy differences. So
on the other hand, as you often say, when we put it down where the goats can get it, if I put my hands on a federal ICE agent, I'd go to jail. There's no question.
Yeah. I think that's fair. That's a fair point there, Carl. Anyway, we're going to have to take a break right now. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom and Carl. We'll be right back after these words. Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom and Carl. And Carl, the Supreme Court on yesterday, said that the Trump administration would be allowed to remove temporary protective status, TPS, for about 350,000 Venezuelans, potentially subjecting them to deportation. Carl, this is the latest from the Supremes on Trump's emergency appeals. Apparently it was an 8-1 decision. It's a victory for Trump, but what happens now?
Well, what happens now is the administration decides whether it wants to deport all these people. Now, there are going to be bad headlines about that if they do that. These people, I think you can have great solicitude for these Venezuelans. They live in a country where a succession of socialist governments have wrecked the economy. It's hardly possible to make a living there and feed your family. And they come here, and they were invited by the Biden administration. They were given this protected status. Now that's being revoked. So it seems unfair to them that they're pawns. But the issue for the Supreme Court is a pretty basic one, and that is, if this didn't go through Congress, this wasn't part of the normal immigration law. This wasn't a thing that the Biden administration decided to do. It was done by executive order. And what the court is finding, it seems they almost had to find, if a president can do this by executive order, then the next president can undo it by executive order. And that actually sets the scene for deportation of all these people who came here under Biden, if the court finds that the Biden administration was either not following the law or would waive the law unilaterally or had signed executive orders that made this possible. So I see this as a pretty important decision, even though I think it's going to cause some hardship for some people who did nothing wrong.
Yeah, Tom, about 7.5 million people have left Venezuela. It is an economic basket case, 200% inflation, all that sort of thing. But there's a lot of economic problems around the world.
I was just going to say, I mean, we look, there are plenty of countries all over the world that are as bad or worse than Venezuela, and we can't be taking in all of them. Look, this decision you mentioned, it's 8-1. I think Ketanji Brown Jackson was the only one who dissented. So even the liberals, Elena Kagan, Sotomayor, were in favor of this. And I mean, by definition, it is temporary protected status. Temporary, which means it's not forever and can be revoked. And that's what the administration is doing. Now, to Carl's point, there will probably be some bad headlines about this, because I'm sure not all these folks are, have criminal records or something like that. And so they will be sent back, and I'm sure there will be, plenty of media coverage of them and crying as they're getting loaded onto planes and sent away. But at the same time, there still is, I think, a strong support for Trump to reverse a lot of the open border. And this was part of it. I mean, when they were using the CPB app to have people, come through the country, just sign up with your phone. I mean, the Biden administration did a lot of things, as many things as humanly possible, it seems, to get as many illegal immigrants into the country as quickly as they could. And so I still think there's strong, majority support for this among the public, but Carl's right, it'll probably come with some unfavorable headlines, which, quite frankly, I don't think the administration doesn't seem too concerned about that these days.
Yeah, and you should point out, the government pointed out that revoking this status isn't the same as saying that they're going to deport them. It just it allows them to do it, I guess. And there's another 500,000 immigrants from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, including Venezuela, that are a separate group that Supreme Court's going to weigh in on that as well.
Can I just bring up one other thing that's related to this, which, Tim Walz gave a speech the other day, commencement speech at the University of Minnesota, where he likened ICE agents to Trump's modern day Gestapo, and that they're snatching people off the streets and doing all this stuff. And Tom Homan was on Fox and Friends, I think, this morning, or one of the morning shows, and gave a response. And he said, how dare he call these people who get up in the morning while Tim Walz is still sleeping at 3 a.m. and strap on a firearm and a Kevlar vest and go out and take criminals off the streets. And he said, including the state of Minnesota, where they've, grabbed a bunch of criminals and gotten them out of the country. And again, I think Democrats, this idea, there was the defund ICE. We already went through that once, and that didn't work well for Democrats. But here's Tim Walz sort of reprising that by calling them modern day Gestapo agents. I don't think that's good policy. I don't think that's good politics for the Democrats. And certainly Tim Walz thinks he's a leader of the party and someone who might run for president in 2028.
Yeah, well, you might have just stolen one of my contenders for You Can't Be Serious this week.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Comment. I had that I had that bookmarked, but
okay.
I'll come up with something else by Friday. But Carl, speaking of You Can't Be Serious, James Comey was on MSNBC explaining to Nicole Wallace about those seashells that he and his wife found that spelled out 8647. He told her, we stood over it, he and his wife, and he said, and I said, I think it's some kind of political message. And his wife said, 86, when I was a server, she did a lot of work in restaurants, he said, it meant to remove an item from a menu when you ran out of ingredients. And I said, well, to me as a kid, it always meant to leave a place, to ditch a place. That's really clever. So then she said, you should take a picture of that. That's the explanation. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I think it's unmanly to blame your wife for something that's stupid that you did. Let's just start with that. I don't believe a word of it necessarily. But the other thing he said to Nicole Wallace, a friendly interlocutor, this isn't my first rodeo. And by that, he meant, of course, Washington is so mean-spirited, people would deliberately take this out of context and try and make me look bad. And it made me think, okay, what's the constant here and what's the variable? Comey's always looking bad. Remember, he's the one, if Donald Trump had not won in 2016 and Hillary Clinton had been elected president, she would have fired Comey a lot faster than Trump did. Now, we know this. The Clinton people blamed, with good reason, they blamed him for her loss. Lanny Davis wrote a book about it. We've had him on the show. He's a good friend of ours. And he walked through the numbers, the RealClearPolitics polling average, and looked at, and he thinks Comey cost her that election. He's been trying to make up for it ever since. But what he seems to miss the point here is that, this fiction about not knowing what that phrase meant aside, it doesn't mean to assassinate someone. It's been used that way by some mafia people and crime novelists. Oh, Comey's into crime novels. But anyway,
he just published. He's out selling his third crime novel right
but
now.
He never heard this phrase. Look, Gretchen Whitmer had a thing on her desk, 8645, during Trump's first term in president. And this was the crap hit the fan then. And the Trump people played that. Oh, she's calling for the assassination. Nobody believed that then. But Gretchen Whitmer's a partisan politician. Comey was head of the FBI, and the FBI has this, accumulating record of all these dirty tricks they played on Trump. The FBI is supposed to protect the president of the United States, whatever party that person's in, is supposed to uphold the law. And Comey doesn't seem to see, he's famous because he was the FBI director. He should behave like an FBI director, nonpartisan person, not this person he's become. So, once again, he seems to miss the point of his own story, to me, at least.
Now, I will say, he said his wife said, take a picture of it. He didn't say that his wife said, hey, why don't you post this on social media so the world can see it?
Still, though, I mean, look, the guy was a bad FBI director and he's a bad husband. I mean, he's blaming his wife on national television. It's her fault. I don't know. I don't know. Listen, I after watching that interview, I'm probably secretly more convinced than ever that he arranged those shells himself and he didn't just wander across them. But that's just me. I mean, I'm, as you said the other day, Andy, I've walked on a lot of beaches. I've never seen anything like that. It doesn't mean it didn't happen or couldn't have happened, but Comey's just he's just such a weasel that it's hard to take anything he says at face value. But,
well, he did get us to talk about him 2 days in a row, and he does have a novel out. So something's working.
Mission accomplished.
Mission accomplished, right. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Carl and Tom. Don't go away. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to Real Clear Politics. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom and Carl. And Tom, some media news. I know you like to talk about the media. The president of CBS News, Wendy McMahon, resigned yesterday, Monday. She's been in the position for about 2 years. She is leaving because she, quote, could not agree on the path forward with management regarding Paramount's apparent plans to settle this lawsuit with President Trump, which is over the editing of an interview with Kamala. Earlier this month, the executive producer of 60 Minutes resigned as well. So what's going on with CBS and what do you make of it?
Well, the argument is that Sherry Redstone, the head of CBS, is trying to get this settlement done so she can sell the company and wants to make nice with the Trump administration so she can unload.
Not have antitrust problems.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so, and that may be true. I don't know. But clearly, there's trouble within the ranks at CBS News. And for, to only be in the job 2 years and then resign. And what, Carl, I think Bill Owens is his name, right? He was
Right.
No, I know him.
yeah, and he was there for decades.
Forever. Yeah.
So
Well, he ran 60 Minutes for about 12 years, and he's been
right.
at CBS for 25 or 30. Yeah.
Yeah. So now you've got two of their sort of major players resigning in the last couple of weeks over the same issue. It's not a good look for CBS.
Yeah. Well, this deal, it's an $8 billion deal with Skydance is the company. It's worth about $2 billion to her, to Sherry Redstone, who was the daughter of Sumner Redstone, sort of a cable magnate. But the other thing about Wendy McMahon, she got rid of Nora O'Donnell, replaced her with John Dickerson and Maurice Dubois. She's got the CBS Mornings with Gayle King, which is not doing well in the ratings. So, it's not like she was riding really high, Carl. Is this maybe, there may be more here than just a sort of, falling on a sword?
Well, yeah, but this Trump lawsuit is the thing that we ought to be focused on, because he has no cause of action whatsoever. He has a lawsuit. He's suing because they selectively edited. So what if they selectively edited?
Right.
It may not be good journalism. It's not a tort. This is a clear First Amendment case. CBS can fight this and win. There's no question in my mind about that. To me, it's a lawsuit that I'm surprised it's even gone this far. But CBS wants to settle it. That's the rumor we keep hearing. And these people are leaving because they can't in good conscience be there. ABC settled a lawsuit. George Stephanopoulos libeled Donald Trump. That was the allegation, called him a rapist. That wasn't exactly what the judge called him. That was a mistake. You'd think Donald Trump is libel proof, by the way. I mean, the things that he's been called by the Democrats in half the country, and the things he's done and said himself. But this is a bad precedent for the press. And if you can be critical of CBS, you can think that they mismanaged that Kamala Harris interview. You can be critical of things that they do on their network every day. But these lawsuits designed to silence the press are a danger. They're a danger to liberal press, conservative press, nonpartisan press. And it's a form of bullying. And I don't think CBS should give into it. If I was working there, I would have concerns about this as well. If it's worth $2 billion to Sherry Redstone, I don't blame her. Make it go away. That'd be her attitude. But there's a principle here. When you do an interview, and Andy, you were in TV for many years. We're not a transcription service. We don't just roll the tape and play the whole thing. We've never done that.
Yeah, I will say.
And where does that stop? Can they go into the Washington Post and you're telling, hey, here, this guy said a quote, you didn't use it in your story. We've got a cause of action. I think this is very dangerous.
Yeah. I was always taught that your raw tapes are the equivalent of a reporter's notes, and that you don't have to share them with anyone. You shouldn't plan on sharing them, and you should not share them with anyone. So I'm Carl, I'm foursquare with you. I think that CBS should fight this, because selectively editing an interview is what television producers do. It's
what all journalists have to do.
Hold on.
Yeah.
We let's be careful with that. I mean, we cut things, not we, but and Andy, you have the most experience of anyone in this, right? You cut things to shorten, you cut things for clarity.
Right.
You cut things, maybe you might cut out ums and ahs to help people not look stupid, which is what Wendy King does for us on this show sometimes. But you don't take a question and then edit in a totally different answer, right? And put those two together and make them seem like she was answering a specific question when she was answering a totally different question.
Well,
that seems dishonest. And I may agree with Carl. I don't know that it necessarily means that they should settle for $20 million, but it is bad journalism and it is unethical, and they shouldn't have done that.
But no, I agree with that. My point is just that the idea that you selectively edit is part of part of the job, is that you do often interview someone for an hour and you've got
Maybe the
6
distinction
minute
here is selectively edit versus deceptively edit.
Yeah.
Well, but Tom,
But so much of this would be in the eyes of the beholder. I guess that's my problem.
Donald Trump and J.D. Vance ran. I hark back to the same issue on the criminal justice system. They ran in opposition to censorship. I think it's one of the reasons they won. I think it's one of the reasons you were talking about Tim Walz, the idiot statement he made recently. It's one of the reasons J.D. Vance cleaned this guy's clock in the debate, because J.D. Vance had a full-throated and articulate and passionate argument against censorship. So this administration should be extra careful about doing things that look like they're trying to influence the press, squelch the press, censor the press.
Okay, that's fine. But at the same time, can we just say, like, if you ask me a question, what's 2 + 2, and I say 4, and then later on in the interview you ask me what something, and I say the number 5, and you take the question, hey Tom, what's 2 + 2, and then you edit in my answer to say 5 to make me look like an idiot and an asshole, that is not freedom of the press.
But that's not what CBS did. She said 5, and then later they edited in 4. They made her look better. Not
okay, but that is not a freedom of the press censorship issue.
It's not a tort, Tom, and the government shouldn't censor. I'm an absolutist here.
I absolutely think that if nothing else, CBS should fight it just on principle, because I think they would win.
But they should also be honest when they're editing stuff.
Yeah, sure,
right? Okay.
Sure. But the arbiter of what's honest journalism should not be
the government.
The government, especially when the company is facing a merger. That's the way I look at it. Well, guys, we're going to have to leave it there. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth, but don't go away. We'll be right back with more after this. Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth, and for our next segment, we've once again invited Charlie Stone, a contributor at RCP, to share his latest interview that he conducted for the RCP video series, The Unknowns. Charlie's guest is John Bolton, former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations and National Security Advisor from 2018 to 2019. Now, here's Charlie Stone in conversation with John Bolton.
Today we have John Bolton, a longtime public servant, diplomat, attorney, former UN ambassador, U.S. National Security Advisor. The list goes on, and also best-selling author of The Room Where It Happened. So, Ambassador, what happened in that room? Give us a little summary.
Well, I wrote in the book that working inside the Trump administration was like living in a pinball machine. When I took the job with Trump, people often say, well, why did you do it? Had you heard anything about him? And I said, yeah, I heard pretty much everything, I think. But I nonetheless believe that, like every one of his predecessors, that the gravity of the responsibilities, the impact of the decisions he would make, certainly in the national security space, would help discipline him. And in fact, I turned out to be completely wrong about that. And part of the struggle was to try and keep policy moving in an orderly direction along the lines he wanted, but just to try and get done what he said he wanted to get done and think about the future a little bit.
You know, if there was a glass door, which is the rating system for employers, 92%, it's been estimated, of high-level officials have left Trump administrations. Why is that? Why does everybody sort of at some point either get fired or have had enough?
Well, I think a lot of people who go into the executive branch are people who have certain views of how the government should work. They think they're going to try and help out, whether they're Republican side or Democratic side. They're certainly not doing it for the money. They're not running for office. It's not the political thrill. It's to go do an unglamorous bureaucratic job and help try and move the country in the policy direction that they favor. But because Trump doesn't really have a philosophy, because he doesn't, in national security, doesn't have grand strategies, he doesn't do policy the way that's conventionally understood in Washington, I think people grow frustrated. He can change his mind on a dime. He resists the discipline of orderly policy development, and I think he gets tired of people after a while. So maybe they get tired of him first. It depends on the circumstances, but the statistics speak for themselves. And I just had a friend who had hoped for a high-level job in the new Trump administration, and he didn't get it. And I said, well, what are you going to do? Stay in the private sector? He said, yeah, you know what turnover is like in a Trump administration. I'll get it soon enough.
Well, maybe y'all can start a glass door for the Trump administration. Might be interesting, some of the comments. All right, let's talk about some of the whiplash that has occurred around tariffs, right? These are something that Trump has implemented seemingly on his own volition. Give me a sense of how your opinion on that policy and how it was rolled out. And most importantly, how does it affect sort of global hegemony, alliances, and other things that could have long-term effects?
Well, my general perspective is, as a free trader, I thought that's what Republicans basically were. We don't like more taxes. We don't like more government regulations. We don't like the government trying to pick winners and losers. There are certainly cases where there are examples in the international trading system where we're treated unfairly. Those need to be addressed. There have been, over a sustained period of time, failures to see national security implications in some industrial patterns. And then finally, China is the major bad actor in international trade, and we definitely need to do something about that. They've stolen our intellectual property over the years and done a host of other things that are unfair to us and everybody else in the international trading system. But that doesn't mean that you break up the international trading system to deal with the problems, and particularly not in the way that Trump has done it. He calls it a 10% baseline tariff. I mean, I think the baseline tariff ought to be zero. That's my approach. And reciprocal tariffs that, frankly, people think are laughable in the way they were calculated. This has had the economic impact, I think, will be substantial. We still don't know exactly, but I can tell you around the world, the political impact has been devastating to decades of effort by Americans to build up relations of trust, good faith, reliance, goodwill with other countries around the world, especially our friends who can't understand why, if we've got a dispute with them, we can't talk to them about it and find a resolution. So people will debate how bad it will be economically, and we'll find out in due course. But the political reaction, combined with some other aspects of Trump policy, Ukraine, and others, unfortunately, I think are going to have long-term impacts.
Former President Biden and his administration had sought sanctions, or actually applied sanctions to the Iranian Guard for actually putting a fatwa on your head and to threaten to kill you. First of all, like, just as a human, when you hear something like that, some other foreign nation has sort of put things in motion to harm you, how does that make you feel?
Well, not good is the short answer. You know, it's a condition of dealing with regimes like this that try to terrorize people. That's why Iran is our oldest state sponsor of terrorism. That's what they do. They do it to their opponents domestically. They do it internationally. This is actually the first time, I think, that U.S. officials have been targeted by a foreign government. Trump's at the top of the list. There are several others as well. And it really raises a question that we fortunately haven't had to deal with as a matter of policy before, is how do we react to that kind of threat? Because in a sense, the threat is what is intended to intimidate not just the people who are named, but other people who take the positions that I and others who came under that threat eventually assume. It's got to have a negative effect. And I think our inability or unwillingness to deal with that only encourages more behavior like that by other rogue states.
Well, President Biden, who you probably have a lot of policy disagreements, was instrumental in implementing those sanctions, whereas President Trump removed your security detail, also from Pompeo and Hook. Like, again, at that moment, what is your thinking? Like, these are fellow Americans telling you that you're going to have to go it alone.
Yeah. Well, I had that experience with Trump before. I resigned on September the 10th. 2019. Normally, when a national security advisor leaves, they keep Secret Service protection for some, reasonable period of time, relatively brief, 3 months, 6 months, something like that, just to make sure some foreign government doesn't kidnap you and give you truth serum to get out whatever secrets you remember. Trump cut my Secret Service off the day I resigned, just to make the point. So I thought in the back of my mind when he was elected again and it was coming up on his inauguration, it might happen. I have to say, I was a little surprised I learned about it at 11:30 at night on inauguration day. Otherwise, a pretty busy day. He still had time to pull the protection. Tells you something about the man.
Some have indicated that there's a vindictive behavior by him. He seems to weaponize, targets those who disagree with him, either through arrest, lawsuit, deportation. How does this play out? There's this culture of fear that unless you're as some would say, a sycophant, right, you're not going to be valuable to Trump or the administration.
You know, reprisals and political payback are common. I mean, that's part of politics. As Peter Finley Dunn once wrote years back, politics ain't beanbag. For Trump, though, it's a contact sport. I mean, retribution is a common mode of operation for him, and it's intended to intimidate people. It often has that impact. I think it coarsens the political process and the society. I mean, there's back and forth in politics. That's a given, but he takes it to a whole new level. And unfortunately, I think as he sets new precedents in different ways, pulling people's security clearances as well as security details, signing executive orders designating particular individuals for investigation by the Justice Department, he's laying the groundwork for future administrations to do the same thing. And I'm worried we're already in something of a downward spiral in the civility of our politics, that this is certainly going to make it worse. He said he didn't like having the Justice Department weaponized against him, and yet his remedy for that is to weaponize it against his opponents. The only answer here is for a president who actually thinks that if he just doesn't behave in that way, he may change things. Hopefully it will.
And if you look at his cabinet, do you have hope for some of those folks who will eventually sort of perhaps follow your lead and actually state an opinion that the president may disagree with? Who in that cabinet has the sort of straightforwardness and gravitas that they could do that?
Well, I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but I do think Marco Rubio has had a distinguished career in Congress, was a presidential contender before. I hope he feels free to voice his opinions. I thought Mike Waltz did too as National Security Advisor, and nobody should have been surprised at that. Let's look at the title of the job, National Security Advisor. You'd think that would mean giving opinions. I think Doug Burgum at the Interior Department, he's been a governor. He's been an extremely successful business person. You need the president to hear opinions that are different from his, not because an administration has to be philosophically all across the board. You can have a very conservative or a very liberal group of people. They're still going to have different opinions on priorities, on operationalizing decisions, on a whole range of things. And a president who doesn't hear honest debate among his advisors is not well served by it. Trump may not like it, but he's not well served by it, and neither is the country.
We sort of have indicated his recent trip to the Middle East. Some have called it a bro fest, where the president called some of the leaders magnificent, handsome, praised the $400 million Boeing jet. What do you make of all that? What is he doing?
If it were any other president who didn't use some of those phrases, you would say this is a reaffirmation of 35 years plus of American policy to keep the Gulf Arab oil-producing nations close to the United States, to get them to buy U.S. aerospace and defense things, tighten the relationship, find some American investment there. All that for me was just normal diplomatic good work. What bothers me, though, is the taint of the family, the Trump family, and its involvement and the various other things that go with it. I think actually Trump has succeeded in embarrassing the Qataris. I don't think they saw what this was going to provoke, the reactions provoked, even among very strong Trump supporters in this country. And my advice to the Qataris is, if you want to give us a gift, help rebuild the Al Udeid Air Base, help rebuild Central Command in Tampa, help rebuild Special Operations Command in Tampa. Make it a gift to the United States, Defense Department to Defense Department. We would welcome that, and it would help us plus up our military budget.
Last question. There were reports that President Trump, for whatever reason, didn't like your signature mustache. Was that true?
He denied it, and I always remembered his father had a mustache. Maybe there's something deeply Freudian there. I'm not a shrink. I don't really care. And I think for well or ill, I don't think it had any impact at all.
Last question. You may not like this one, but if Trump were to resign if you shaved your mustache, would you shave your mustache?
If J.D. Vance would resign too.
Well, thank you very much, Ambassador. Appreciate your time and wish that you would come back when you have more time to share.
Well, thanks very much for having me. I'd like to do that.
You've been listening to RCP contributor Charlie Stone in conversation with John Bolton. You can hear and see the full exchange, as well as more of Charlie's interview series on RealClearPolitics.com. And that will do it for today's program. I'm Andrew Walworth. On behalf of Carl, Tom, Charlie, and all of us here at RCP, thank you for listening. We'll be back here tomorrow. Have a great evening.